Now, I want you to know that the last speaker of the day asked to be the last speaker of the day. He's not here because he's the end of the line or we just wanted more interesting companies first. He specifically asked for the last spot of the day because he started his day marketing on the East Coast, been on a plane all day, he's exhausted. Nobody wants a beer more than the CEO of Cardinal Energy probably at the end of this day. So Scott has been, I followed Scott's career for a long time. We were with him at Midway when that got bought out, and then I watched Cardinal as and Summerland as private co since the day they've got going. He's done a great job here in the last year in getting a new suite of assets into the company, lightening his crude mix, and still having a lot of torque to the oil price. So he's got a dividend that when I went in to talk to him last September said was rock solid right down to $40 a barrel. And he says, and it would have to stay there for a while for me to even think about it. So now with the upturn in commodity pricing, his stock's had a fantastic benefit out of that. And he's going to give us the full update and how he's going to move forward in the future. Scott Ratushny from Cardinal Energy.
Thanks, Keith. I'll figure out the controls here. Okay, a quick snapshot on Cardinal. I think what we'll do is give you guys a look back and so you can understand where we're going to go on a go-forward basis. So we've been around since 2012. We started off with a specific mandate. So we're a lot different than most of the companies you've seen today. We set off to do two things. One is to pay a dividend, and the other one is to show a little bit of growth every year. And when we looked at it and figured out how we're going to build a company that's going to do that, it all came down to declines. And we do have the lowest decline of any conventional producer in Canada. We run 9 to 10% decline right now, and that makes the model sustainable. We run through it. Dividend right now is 42 cents a share. We've weathered some tough times with one dividend cut since inception. Like he said, dividends rock solid at these prices. In fact, we're probably in a position where we're looking at doing something with it next year. We've guided this year at 21 to 21.5. On a quarterly basis, we're just over 21 in Q1. We haven't drilled really any wells. We've drilled 2 wells this year so far, so we'll drop a bit in Q2, and you'll see some growth into Q3 and Q4. Our focus has been really to lighten the load. So we started off as a predominantly WCS producer. When our first couple of years, we were almost 100% medium quality crude, 21, 23 API, all based on WCS pricing. Some of the big things in Cardinal where we stand out on is our reserve base. Most of the companies in our peer group have about a third of the reserves in a proved producing category. We run about 65–70% of our reserves as proved producing, so a very solid asset base. The banks like it. We've got a very conservative borrowing policy. We're just going through our bank renewals right now, and we've got it's an asset-based borrowing base at our bank. We've got a $475 million borrowing base. We choose to set a very conservative bank line at $325 million, knowing we're never going to borrow above that. We don't want to pay standby fees on the higher balances. And we'll exit the quarter drawing about $200 million. It will get paid down as the year goes on here. So we look back at this is a slide from our January 2017 PowerPoint. So we set out in 17 to do 4 things. One is to increase our light oil exposure. Second is to increase the netbacks, reduce our operating costs, and then maintain the dividend. So we went through 2017 and started. It was a pretty rocky time, and we thought we did a fairly good job. So we did 2 major acquisitions. We did an acquisition in Grand Prairie and another one from Apache in the Midale and House Mountain areas. Both light oil focused and both change around. So just a quick snapshot, we paid $31 million for it. We spent about $12 million drilling on it last year. Got about $6 million of cash flow back, and our proved developed producing reserve value at year end was $63 million. The acquisition came with 2 Dunvegan oil pools. One thing you have to appreciate about Cardinal is we don't drill a lot of wells in a year. We'll drill 12 to 15 wells per year. We just don't need the volume to replace production. So the first pool we started developing is one of the Dunvegan pools. It came with about 20 drilling locations, mostly all development drilling. We've drilled 6 last year and 2 in Q1, and we'll drill another 2 wells in third quarter this year. The other major acquisition, which was really transformational for us, was Mydale and House Mountain. Yeah. Both bought from Apache. We closed on July 1st. The biggest thing about it is we got Mydale out of the package. Mydale is a world-class oil pool by Canadian standards. Both Mydale and Weyburn are 2 of the original CO2 flood properties in Canada. Mydale has been running at a 2-3% decline for the last 10 years. In fact, it's the same. We haven't drilled a well on it yet. It's exactly the same production today as it was when we closed on July 1st last year. We'll start drilling it this summer, and we see a really large inventory in there. We see 200 to 300 locations in Mydale, so it'll carry Cardinal forward for quite a few years. Again, you consider our pace of drilling is sort of 12 to 15 wells a year. It doesn't take much to make this sustainable. House Mountain, another light oil property. It's just north of Swan Hills. Again, light oil, 95% oil production on the acquisition. There is a drilling inventory. It kicks in at a bit higher price than Mydale does. If you go through Cardinal on a gross basis, we have varying degrees of drilling inventory based on price points. If you look at a $70 oil, we probably have about $600 million worth of drilling inventory right now on a PV10 basis, and kind of back it back to about $300 million worth of inventory at $50 oil. So you look back and say, okay, we set out to achieve a number of things in 17, but you look at the oil production, our light oil barrels increased. We bumped the light oil barrels by 236%. We didn't drill in very many WCS-based wells in 17, so our production actually dropped year over year on the medium quality crude. And then the ultimate report card, what do we look like at the end of it? So we went to increase our light oil exposure. We increased it from 22% to 50% last year. We increased our netbacks, and this is sort of time zeroed on a pricing point from $15 a barrel to $20 a barrel. We reduced our operating costs by over 10%, and we maintained our dividend for the year. So we look back at it and said it was a fairly good report card for the year. For 2018, where are we headed this year? So we're really trying to prove up a sustainable business model. At this oil price point, we have a lot of free cash flow. We're playing a little bit of catch-up right now with our hedge book. We took a look back from inception. We've made, up until December 31st of 17, we made $43 million on our hedge book in the first 5 years. We're going to give back probably half of it this year, and it's the first year where we've been in a significant price increase. We're really focused on making sure we don't spend more than 100% of our cash flow on a quarterly basis. We're running a business, and we need to prove it on a quarterly basis to ourselves and to shareholders that we're not going to outspend our cash flows. The focus for the year is we want to get our bank debt down. We put some debt on to do these 2 acquisitions last year. We're always told to buy low and sell high, and we didn't get rewarded for that in the marketplace, but I think it'll catch up over time. So net bank debt to cash flow of 1 time, we should get there by Q1 of 19, just organically. We want to maintain our decline, and that means don't pushing on the growth button. We can grow in this price environment sort of 5 to 8% a year without having to push on that 10% decline. And we want to continue to improve our netbacks. We've got a number of long lead time operating cost reduction projects. We're focused on 2 areas. One is cogen. We've got large oil facilities. We've got 4 large oil facilities throughout the company, and we are big electrical consumers. Our electrical bill is about $40 million a year right now, and we need to get ourselves off the grid. If you equate it to op costs, we're about $4 a barrel in op costs. We can't get the whole thing off the grid. We don't own the lines, but we can get the major facilities off. So we think we can get about $2.50 a barrel off of our electrical charges over the next couple of years. We'll have about $40–45 million of capital spending to get there, but we think it's most of these projects will pay out in 2 years or less. So it's something we're starting to undertake. We got our first project up in Slave Lake. It'll be up and running by the end of June. It takes the $60,000 a month electrical bill and turns it into burning some solution gas, which we actually lose money on up there trying to get rid of. We've got similar projects. We'll get another 2 or 3 done this year, various scales, and then we'll keep going into 19 and 20 with them. The other thing we're trying to get going is, again, with all these larger facilities, we're pipeline connected for everything in the company. We have opportunities to blend oil. So we've historically haven't taken in third-party oil, and we're starting to do it now. We're converting, first facility we're converting is Midale in Saskatchewan. We've got a truck terminal there already, so we're adding some tankage and blending facilities, and we'll start bringing, I guess there's three ways we'll attack it. One is butane blending our existing crude. Second is trucking in some of our heavier crudes, our 20 API crudes from Jenner and around Medhat areas into there, and the third thing we'll do is start bringing in third-party crudes and blending them up. So we've identified 4 facilities within the company that we can do this in. They're not big capital projects. It's just a learning curve for us to get up to speed. So the first one should be up and running in August, and we'll carry on with the other 3 projects throughout the next year or so. 2018, I don't see us having a dividend bump in 18. I think we'll stay where we're at, focus on the debt reduction, and revisit it in early 19. So if you look at Cardinal by area, the top 2 areas are both light oil. The bottom are WCS price product, fairly consistently spread out by area. Mitsue and House Mountain, again, light oil. We've got no drilling plans in here. Drilling didn't really kicks in here about $60 WTI, and when we did our budgets last November, oil wasn't there, so we didn't have drilling plans for the company for 18 here. We will get back in here in 19 if prices hold and start drilling again. A lot of capital projects in here for op cost reductions, again, blending at both these facilities and cogen in both facilities. Grand Prairie was the little property we picked up as part of one of the first acquisitions. We've been having great drilling results in here where these wells are paying out in 8–9 months at this price point. We'll keep drilling a few more wells this year, and then the property needs to get an EOR scheme implemented on it for 19, so we'll start water flood probably next summer on it. We've got a similar pool just to the south of here. Again, it's got about 20 locations on it, but it's in the scope of Cardinal, it's almost 2 years drilling inventory. So central area is Wainwright and Chauvin in the eastern edge of Alberta. These are the first properties we bought with the company. We haven't drilled a well here since we bought them. We've averaged a 2 to 3% decline per year in the properties. A lot of it's just water flood maintenance. We go in and we tweak the water floods, and we seem to get barrels back every year. Our reserves grow every year on this property. We reduce operating costs, so you bring the reserves from the tail end back in again, and it's just kind of the properties that keep on giving. So Bantry was the drilling for Cardinal for the first 5 years. We had 4 years of really good results in here. We're drilling a channel play. It's a Glock channel play that sits above an existing Ellerslie producing zone. So Ellerslie produces at about 900 meters, and we have a series. We have a lot of bypass pay here, so we see logs on these Glock channels. And for the first 4 years, we could drill from log to log. So I think anybody in this room could have drilled the wells. It was kind of drilling from point A to point B. As we started drilling into 2017, we lost the second control point. So we had the first control point, didn't know where the channel went. And it's, if you can envision it, we're chasing old river channels around, and they do not travel in straight lines typically. So we had mediocre drill results in here last year. A lot of times I would try to drill a 12 to 1400 meter long horizontal. A lot of times we get 300 or 400 meters out and we drill out a channel, and we couldn't find it again. So what we did this winter in January and February, and you see the little red dots on the map there, is we went and drilled a bunch of strat tests. We did a 10-well strat test program where we went in the small hole well, zero disturbance, drilled it, logged it, and got out of there. And it was good. It was a good program. We found Glock channels in 6 of the 10 wells we drilled. We also went down and tagged the Ellerslie in here, which is, I guess, an emerging play. It's an old play, but it's getting a second life. And we found a couple of little Ellerslie pools as part of drilling it too. So worthwhile program. We'll do it again next year. And we just actually finished drilling the first well yesterday on off these strat tests. We flipped up our drilling program a bit this year, and we drilled the first well in 5.5 days, which is a record for us in the area. The previous best was about 8 days. So we went to a monobore type well and had really good success with it. So Midale was the big prize. This is, we think it's in the top 3 oil pools in Western Canada. It's been it's got a direct analog in Weyburn. Both Weyburn and Midale, which touch each other, produce from the same Midale interval. There's 3 sublayers within the Midale interval. They were both discovered by Shell in the 50s. Shell sold Weyburn to Pan Canadian and went on to Cenovus. Now Whitecap owns it, and Shell sold Midale to Apache, and then we ended up with it. If you look at the 2 pools, it's kind of the tale of 2 cities. They took 2 different approaches to development. Pan Canadian took the approach that each of these layers within the Midale interval were sort of 3 different layers to the cake, and they exploited each layer individually. So they'd come in, they'd drill the bottom layer, they'd put water injection into it, and then flip over to CO2 and start to alternate them. Then they move up a layer and do the next layer, and then do the next layer. They've got great results. They've got a 33% recovery in the pool already, and their engineering suggests that they'll have an ultimate recovery of 46%. Apache took a much different approach to it. They thought all 3 zones were connected, and they would just exploit it. So they would come and drill it, and they didn't care how they drilled it. Sometimes they drill 1 layer, sometimes they drill the serpentine through a couple of the layers. But they put all their injection into the bottom. They put water into the bottom, and then all their CO2 in the bottom, thinking the CO2 would migrate up and liberate the oil. And it didn't. There was a lot of vertical permeability barriers. So you've got a very underexploited reservoir in relation to Weyburn. We've got 20% recovery on the pool to date. And with our current drilling and current reserves, they estimate we have another 4%. So our job now is to take the water and the CO2 from the lower zone and start pushing it up to the upper layers and start drilling the upper layers to counteract it. It's pretty compelling when you look at it and see how much opportunity there is there. A 1% increase in recovery factor on this pool replaces Cardinal's production for a year. So it's a very important asset to us, and it's something that we see growing over the next little while. We think we've got a plan that we've kicked off now where we've started just surface optimization, where we're starting to get water and CO2 up into the upper layers. We started drilling in here in August, and we see it a big part of our drilling plans for 19 and 20. On our sort of our 5-year outlook, we think we can double production in this pool over 5 years. So the balance of 18, we see production dropping a bit in Q2, bouncing back up in Q3 as we get the drill bit going again, and then we should show a little growth in Q4. Just for comparison, our average production, I think, in Q4 17 was about 20,200. So we will show 5 to 7% year-over-year growth. Again, staying within budgets. Payout ratios, again, focused on making sure we're under 100%. So it puts us into sort of a 3-year strategy, and we look back at Cardinal, and we historically have traded at a premium to our peers, and the only thing that's really differentiated us from that is our debt. We historically ran from 0 to 0.5 times debt to cash flow. We were pushing over 2. We're running right now around 1.3, 1.4 times. So we got to get it back down. It's a conservative asset. It's a conservative asset base, and we have to make sure all aspects of the business are lined up with that. So the focus over the long term is to get it back down to there. With the blending facilities, and some general op cost reduction as well as cogen, we think we can drop our op cost down from 21 down to 18, 19. We think that's very achievable. We'll continue to increase that light oil weighting quarter over quarter, and we think we can deliver modest growth next year. So if we look forward to 19, we've got, what are we looking for? We're looking for cash flows plus or minus. This is sort of our unhedged version. We're muted a bit this year. We're probably 135 a cash flow this year, given the hedging losses and the slower pickup on WCS. We need about $50 million a year to keep the lights on, do our facility projects, drill enough wells to keep production flat or show a little bit of growth. Right now we pay about $50 million for the dividend. So we've got $125 million essentially of free cash flow if you take the sustaining capital away, which gives us a lot of options for 19. We run an excess funds flow of around $75 million. That's Cardinal. Yeah. Sure. I think one of the things we underestimated what we were going to get for proceeds on them. When we bought the assets from Apache, that came with some royalties and some fee title lands, and we earmarked them for sale. And when we were evaluating it back in April or May of 17, the best precedents we had were similar, almost identical assets sold. Pengrowth and Penwest both sold identical assets, and we looked back and they traded at a fairly healthy multiple. When we came up and we put these things up for sale, we didn't get the bids that they got historically. I think the main buyers were Franco-Nevada, Prairie Sky, Freehold, who had all lost a bit of their multiples over the time, and all of them had transitioned their businesses more into fee title lands than gross overriding royalty purchases. So we didn't get the bids. We sold a couple of them because we had to. We said we were going to do it. We've got one little piece left of the Weyburn interest that we'll piece off. We've got a deal done with it. It should close prior to quarter end, but it's not a big piece. It's kind of $12-13 million. And then we'll hold off and we won't sell the last batch. We just didn't think we needed to. Commodity prices saved our bacon a bit in that sense. That why sell it if you don't have to? It's strictly a multiple of cash flow, and in that case, historically they'd sold between 15 and 20 times, and we got bids in between 10 and 15 times, so it dropped a significant amount. If you put it into drilling locations, we think that 10 strat well program proved up about 20 locations. We'll typically get 2 wells side by side in the Glock Channel, and then the Ellerslie wells. I think you want to keep building the inventory up. There's land expiry issues, there's other things that come up over time, so you want to understand where your locations are. It wasn't expensive. We spent $2.3 million drilling the 10 wells. Everyone's fatigued, it looks like. I think you guys need to have a beer, not me, I think. Thanks, Steve.